Title: No more regrets, just kill me. The scene opens in a palace room. A man enters the room and finds a woman, presumably Ariadne, in a distressed and unstable state. She appears to be in a fit of madness, crying out uncontrollably. The maid nearby explains, "The madam intentionally tried to hurt herself, and we couldn't stop her." The man, shocked and concerned, calls out her name, Ariadne. Upon seeing her eyes, the man is struck with recognition. He realizes that her eyes mirror the same haunted look he had when he was once suffering from psychosis. He wonders to himself, has she been infected with my curse? Without hesitation, he orders everyone else to leave the room. He then takes medicine, pouring it into his own mouth before transferring it to her, urgently trying to save her life. Ariadne, overwhelmed with emotion, begins to cry even harder. She looks at him and says, "Carlothian, you're always making me miserable. Enough already. Just kill me." The scene opens with Yuina at her parents' funeral. We learn that her parents died in a tragic house fire caused by a discarded cigarette, but leading to their suffocation. Yuina, who comes from a financially struggling background, had been pursuing a dream of becoming a singer without her mother's knowledge. Sadly, she never got the chance to share her achievement with her parents. Yuina is heartbroken, feeling as if her purpose and joy are gone, as her parents were likely her main source of motivation. She questions how she's supposed to continue without them. At her lowest point, a manager from the entertainment company where she auditioned approaches her. He offers his condolences and reminds her of her potential, encouraging her not to give up on her dream of singing. This man symbolizes a small beacon of hope, giving Yuina a new reason to move forward despite her immense loss. Following this encouragement, Yuina pursues her singing career. Despite the challenges of the entertainment industry, she finds happiness in living her dream, even though the journey is incredibly demanding and exhausting. During a grueling schedule, she experiences a serious accident. The doctor informs her that continuing to sing may no longer be possible, crushing her dreams once more. With singing as her sole purpose after her parents' passing, this news leaves her devastated and without any motivation to live. Overcome with despair, Yuina makes the heartbreaking decision to end her life, seeing no path forward without her voice and her family. Yuina initially believes that her life ended with her suicide. However, she hears someone calling the name Ariadne and realizes she's in an unfamiliar place. A man near her is distraught, mentioning that she attempted to hang herself right after her wedding to the crown prince, Luciano. As the man continues to speak, Yuina becomes confused by the unfamiliar names and setting. She then recognizes Luciano and Dorothea as characters from a novel she read, The Saint Who Abandons Her Status. It dawns on her that she has been reincarnated as Ariadne, a side character in the story. Ariadne's backstory is filled with unrequited love and jealousy. She was married for political reasons to Carlothian, the man she loved deeply, but he only loved Dorothea, the story's protagonist. This unreturned love drove Ariadne to use black magic out of jealousy, leading to her downfall. She was stripped of her noble status and sent to a monastery. Yuina realizes that, even in this new body, her voice is gone, likely due to the lingering wounds from the hanging attempt. The man caring for her explains that the injury on her neck won't fully heal. She reflects on how, even in this strange, fantasy-like world, she's still trapped without a voice or agency. Feeling hopeless and trapped in the painful situation, Yuina, as Ariadne, tries to end her life again by hanging herself, using her remaining memories of Ariadne's life to find another rope. However, when she wakes up, she's back in the same bed where she started, unharmed but still alive. Yuina is left questioning why she's still alive, unable to escape this new reality, even through death. This scene highlights her feelings of despair and powerlessness. Despite being in a completely different world, her struggles remain similar, emphasizing her internal turmoil. The scene opens with a cold, echoing silence in the royal courtroom. Ariadne kneels before the princess, her shoulders hunched, her face shadowed with despair. Princess, leaning forward with a smug smile. So, you finally understand where you belong, Ariadne. I can almost pity you, but then again, you wouldn't understand that, would you? The princess frames Ariadne because she is also love within him. Ariadne looks up briefly, her gaze hollow. Her lips quiver as she searches for words, but no one expects her to respond. Her position at the princess's feet speaks volumes. The prince's words sting, carrying years of disdain and resentment. Ariadne clenches her fists, feeling the weight of her past mistakes hanging over her like a shadow. Princess, gaze sharpening with a cruel satisfaction, you were always the perfect scapegoat, you know. So flawed, so desperate, always fumbling. And now, all that you've done, look where it's brought you. Ariadne's voice is barely audible, a whisper clawing out from her broken spirit. Ariadne, you may have everything, but you'll never have love either. The princess's smile vanishes momentarily, her eyes narrowing. She responds with a dismissive laugh, as if dismissing a childish remark. Princess, love? You're even more foolish than I thought. Kindness, loyalty, did you ever think those things mattered? Oh, how naive you must have been. Ariadne looks down, and the memories of her past flicker before her eyes, her husband, who never loved her back. Those are the memories of Ariadne. The mastermind of all of this is none other than Imperial Princess. Later, in a secluded room, Ariadne examines herself in a dimly lit mirror. Her reflection is haunted, tired eyes meeting her own. She touches the faint scars on her arms and throat. Every time she tries to kill herself, the time rewind, but scars of her body remains. Ariadne, whispering to herself, why can't it end? Each time, I die, and yet I wake again. Why can't I just be free of this? She pulls back her sleeve to reveal more wounds. She touches them with a hollow, almost absent look, her fingers tracing the scars that speak to her despair. Finally, she comes to a decision. Ariadne, this time, I'll change the place. I won't be found again. Maybe that will finally bring an end. Ariadne finds herself standing alone in a quiet grove. Trees loom above her, their branches casting ghostly shadows on the ground. She gazes up, searching for a strong enough branch. A faint wind stirs the leaves as she ties a rope to the tree, her movements slow, resigned, as if performing a ritual she has prepared for her whole life. As she stands beneath the branch, preparing to slip the noose over her head, a voice cuts through the stillness. Guard, urgent, surprised. Miss, what are you doing? Ariadne turns sharply, her eyes wide. The guard steps forward, noticing the rope and her wounds, his expression softening from shock to concern. Guard, please, what are you doing? You're hurt. Ariadne steps back, panic flaring in her eyes. She knows this is her last moment. She cannot be stopped. She pulls away, breaking into a run. The guard hesitates, watching her flee, confusion and concern etched on his face. Elsewhere, the prince and the saint receive news from the guard. The prince's face hardens with a cold resolve. Prince, Ariadne has caused enough trouble. I should have known she'd attempt something like this. Saint, with a pleading look, Your Highness, I must go with you. Whatever she has done, no one deserves to be left to such despair. I cannot stand idly by. The prince hesitates, but relents as he sees the saint's determination. They set off together, both bound by duty and conflicting emotions. Ariadne ties the rope. Ariadne prepares to throw herself from the branch. The guard catches her in time. And asks, why are you doing this? Ariadne, frustrated, tries to free from the guard. Prince and saint arrived at the scene. The prince draws his sword, cutting the rope swiftly, causing her to fall to the ground, stunned and breathless. Saint, rushing to her side, kneeling down. Ariadne, why would you do this? Ariadne looks up at the saint, her eyes filled with rage, despair, and confusion. She tried to speak, but couldn't speak. Saint, let me Let me heal you. Please. Ariadne's breath catches as she considers her words. If she could heal her throat, perhaps she could finally find peace. Her heart, long shut off from hope, trembles at the possibility. So she won't have to die anymore. Ariadne sat in silence, lost in her thoughts. She's going to heal my throat? Her mind was a swirl of confusion and hope. Of course, Dorothea is a saint. She has far greater healing power than that bald monk. She had been suffering for so long, trapped in a body that could no longer fulfill her most cherished desire, to sing. The thought of being able to raise her voice again, to feel the music flow through her body, was like a distant dream she never thought would be realized. But now, there was a chance. A glimmer of hope sparked in her chest. The saint, Dorothea, had explained that since it was just an external wound, she should be able to heal it. The external wound. Ariadne's hand instinctively touched her throat. It burned with an unspoken pain, the result of too many attempts to silence her own voice in the past. Dorothea smiled gently at her. Don't worry, Ariadne. This will only take a moment. Ariadne could feel the warmth of Dorothea's healing aura even before the saint began her chant. The melody was soft at first, like a gentle breeze caressing the soul. It was a common tune, something Ariadne had heard countless times in her life, but the way Dorothea sang it was different. Her voice, Ariadne thought, mesmerized. It's beautiful. It wasn't just a song, it was a healing force. The notes carried with them a promise of restoration, a balm for both the body and the spirit. But as the song continued, something began to change. Ariadne felt a sharp pain in her throat, a searing fire that burned like molten iron. Her hands shot up to her neck as if she could smother the flames. My throat, it burns, she gasped, a strangled cry escaping her lips. She looked up at Dorothea in panic, her eyes pleading. Stop. Please stop singing. But her voice betrayed her. No words came, only a hoarse, guttural sound. The guards, who had been standing watch nearby, rushed to her side. Your Highness, one of them shouted, clearly confused and alarmed. What's happening to her? The prince, who had been standing behind the saint, looked on in confusion as well. What is this? Why isn't the wound healing? He muttered, his brow furrowing. The saint herself froze, her face pale with shock. Why isn't it healing? She whispered, her voice shaking as she turned toward Ariadne. Tears welled up in Ariadne's eyes as she clutched at her neck. No. The realization hit her like a cold wave. This wound. It can't be healed. She stared at her hands, trembling, and the tears spilled freely down her cheeks. The weight of her despair pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. I can't speak. Ariadne thought, her thoughts spiraling into madness. I can't sing, I can't even talk. Why am I still here? Why can't I just die already? Her body trembled as she fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. She was lost. The light that had once driven her forward had gone out, and there was nothing left but the endless darkness of her own despair. Later that day, the Cathedral of St. Burial. Ariadne sat before the towering altar, staring blankly at the stained glass window depicting Lord Burial. The light streaming through the colored glass painted the floor in brilliant hues, but the beauty of the scene was lost on her. It was as if the world had turned to gray. Dorothea had led her here in the hopes that praying to St. Burial would restore her. The saint had cried, likely because she couldn't heal Ariadne's wound, but her tears seemed nothing compared to Ariadne's own. Why do you cry for me, Dorothea? Ariadne wondered bitterly. Why do you care? But the saint's grief wasn't the only thing on Ariadne's mind. As she stared at the sacred image, something strange caught her eye. A book, lying open beside her, seemed to pulse with an eerie, almost living energy. As she absently turned its pages, her heart skipped a beat. The words on the pages began to move. At first, Ariadne thought she was imagining it, but no, the text was changing. It writhed like something alive, shifting and rearranging in real time. The familiar words, Ariadne, who failed to take her own life, was consumed by revenge and resorted to forbidden black magic, seemed to jump off the page, their meaning sinking deep into her consciousness. What is this? Ariadne thought, her breath catching in her throat. This isn't part of the story. Then it happened. The pages turned, and she saw the story of her own demise unfold. You came back to kill me, right? The words seemed to whisper in her mind, just as the final moment approached in the novel. The cruel twist of fate that had been set in motion so many years ago now felt closer than ever. I'll make sure you can never forget me, even when that woman is gone, the text seemed to say. Ariadne's heart clenched. It was a memory from the past, Carlotion. He had been the one to end her life in the end, hadn't he? She was nothing more than a tragic side character, consumed by her unrequited love, knowing that he had chosen someone else. But even as the story unfolded before her eyes, something nagged at her. Is that all there is? She wondered, bitterness creeping into her thoughts. Is this how it ends for me? The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. If she followed the story, if she allowed the events to play out as they were written, she might finally be able to die. And if the story was correct, it would be at the hands of Carlotion's sword. Ariadne jumped to her feet, a strange sense of joy filling her chest. She ran, ignoring the surprised gasps of the priests around her. She ran with all her strength, fueled by the hope that she might finally find peace through death. But then, something stopped her. She froze in her tracks, looking down at the hem of her dress. Her heart skipped a beat as a wave of emotion swept over her. She realized that there was one thing missing, the one thing that the Ariadne in the spin-off story had possessed, the one thing that she no longer had. I can't speak. The realization hit her like a blow to the gut. Why was she unable to speak, even in this crucial moment? Why was her voice still stolen from her, when the Ariadne in the other timeline could at least express her sorrow? Tears welled in her eyes once more as she clutched her dress, the weight of her broken heart almost too much to bear. The priests, who had been watching in confusion, rushed toward her. Your Highness, why are you crying? What has happened? At that moment, Dorothea and the prince entered the cathedral. Their eyes immediately found Ariadne, standing alone in the center of the vast hall. The saint's gaze softened with concern as she approached, her voice full of worry. Ariadne, she said gently, why are you crying? What has happened to you? Ariadne's heart pounded in her chest, but she could not find the words. Am I not allowed to have hope? She thought. Is dying the only option left to me? If so, then just end it already. I don't want to keep living in this prison. But as she looked at Dorothea, something within her shifted. Maybe it wasn't death she truly longed for, but something else entirely. Am I allowed to dream again? The scene shifts to the saint's room. The air is heavy with a somber stillness as the saint sits near a window, her gaze distant. The wound on Ariadne's neck catches her eye once more. It was not just a single, desperate act. No, it seemed as though Ariadne had tried to end her life more than once. The faint bruises on her neck told a story of repeated attempts, each more painful than the last. A soft knock at the door interrupts her thoughts, followed by the sudden entrance of the prince. His presence is unexpected, and she jumps slightly at the sound of his voice. What are you so deep in thought about? He asks, his expression gentle but curious. The saint quickly turns her attention away from Ariadne's wounds, masking the concern in her eyes. Could it be that you're worried about Ariadne? The prince continues, taking a step closer. The saint hesitates before responding, her voice firm as she shakes her head. No, it's not that. The prince raises an eyebrow. I came because I was worried she might lash out after hearing about Carlotta's engagement announcement. But she seems calmer than I expected. The saint, who had been lost in thought, glances back at the prince, her expression softening slightly. It's a relief that she's not as distraught as I feared. The prince leans in, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. By the way, there's the monastery outside the capital that should be informed of our marriage, but it's not the ideal place for newlyweds to be cooped up alone. I still want to spend a little more time alone with you, away from all of this. The saint's heart tightens at his words. She has long cherished these moments with him, but the situation is delicate, and her duty calls louder than her desire. She stands, her resolve firm. "We can't do that," she says, her voice unwavering. The prince, surprised, takes a step back. "What do you mean?" The saint walks toward the window, her gaze now fixed on the distant skyline of the capital. "Ariadne should be taken to the capital," she explains. "She needs medical attention, and, more importantly, she needs protection. The city may provide her with more security than this remote place."